Hello, and welcome back to my workshop. My project this time is going to be a custom aggregate car that has absolutely no prototype for my Stratton and Gillette Railroad. And this is going to be a very interesting project because I have had these pieces sitting around for a while. When I put together pieces for a project, I like to store them inside of these plastic boxes. I believe this box is either from a KD kit or a Broadway Limited kit. They make great things for storing projects in. This one is made up of three pieces. There is a vintage European hopper car from Triang, and I believe it's OO scale, not actually HO. And the bottom half of this car looks absolutely terrible, but the top half looks pretty good. I also have an Athearn undecorated 40-foot flat car, and the 40-foot flat car was damaged. It was put together poorly, and I bought it. And I threw away the trucks and couplers, of course. The underframe I saved. And I have a resin casting of a hopper bottom from a scrap box. And I believe that hopper bottom is from a Funaro and Camerlengo H30 hopper car kit. These pieces I'm going to combine into a very interesting, one-of-a-kind, unique freight car that I'm just going to call an aggregate car because I don't know what else to call it. So the Triang hopper car is molded in bright red plastic. It isn't painted. And the bottom half of this car just looks terrible. The trucks look terrible, but the hopper has potential. So we'll see what we can do with that. And this poor flat car, it definitely wasn't salvageable back to its original state, so we're just going to cut it up even more and make it into something. And this hopper bottom right here, like I said, is from a Funaro and Camerlengo resin kit. This hopper car actually has an operating bottom chute. It is definitely a toy. It is not a scale model whatsoever. But the operating chute is actually very, very well made. It's all metal and it works flawlessly. I have no idea how old this is, but they did a good job on that. The great feature on this car that I liked for this project, rather than just using a regular hopper car, is this part of the bottom of the hopper where the hopper slopes in. And that actually makes it line up with the hopper bottom from the H30 hopper car. The very first step is to get out the Zona saw and start removing the hopper body from the flat car portion from the original Triang model. The Zona saw made this very easy. The saw wasn't quite deep enough to reach in and hack the ends of the hopper off the car from the long end. I had to do that at a little bit of an angle. And I was, of course, not able to cut through the steel bracket on the one end where the discharge mechanism for the hopper was that made it operable. And that's really no big deal because I'm going to have to use something more powerful to get it off. And I have tools here to get that done. So everything is loose except for that one end where the metal bracket is riveted in place. And we're going to have to get out some kind of a much more heavy tool to get that part of the job done. I think one of these drill bits should be the right size to drill out that rivet. This one looks good. And I'm going to use the Milwaukee M18 drill. This battery-operated drill is very, very powerful, very professional tool, and it should make absolute fast work of getting rid of these rivets. Always wear safety glasses when you cut into metal, even if it's just tiny little metal on a toy train car. And just as I suspected, these two rivets gave up no resistance whatsoever. So I was able to pull that part of the discharge mechanism out from underneath the truck, and now I can get in there with my Zona saw and cut the rest of this hopper body off of the flat car chassis. And just like that, it's done. That's the part I'm going to use. The rest of this is all garbage into the trash. Placing it on top of the Athearn flat car and then moving the piece from the resin hopper car to the bottom, it all looks like this could come together quite well. I just take the Zona saw and I cut a little bit into this resin hopper casting. I don't cut all the way through, just a little bit, and then it snaps. I take the saw and I clean up the edges just a little bit, make it a little narrower, test fit it into the Athearn flat car body, and that's good, except it doesn't stick out the bottom very far. When I get a little further in this project, I think I'll put a little bit of a spacer in there and place it down as far as I can. I try to weight all my 40-foot cars to be as close to 4 ounces as possible. Give or take a quarter ounce is just fine with me. So this entire car weighs right at about an ounce. So I'm going to add these lead weights to the scale until I get it up to about 3.5 ounces. That's 3.63. That's a little much. Maybe we'll take that off and try a thinner weight. Get a half weight, makes it 3.39. When I add the KD trucks, that will get it close to 4. KD trucks weigh about a half ounce. And I take the razor saw and I'm cutting the Athearn flat car frame apart. I'm not going to use the center part of the frame. That's where the hopper body is going to be. And I'm also not going to use these coupler pockets. I'll take a pair of nippers and just get rid of those, and they can go into the trash. And since I'm using KD trucks like I do on all my freight cars, this centering nub for the Athearn truck can go away as well. I'm not going to use these stirrups. They're way too big and clumsy looking, so I get rid of those. I've also cut off the brake wheel from the body, and I'm using a number 11 X-Acto knife blade to very carefully go into here and remove the cast-on grab irons from the sides and the ends. I have 2 rivet holes I need to cover up. I was going to fill them in with putty, but I think I'll just take some 20 thousandths thick by 188 styrene, and I'm just going to make a rib to go up the center of the car for support. And that'll make the car look better anyway, make it look a little more heavy duty. A little bit of 60 by 60 thousandths square centered into the inside of that 188 strip. And that's going to make it look like a piece of hat channel, which would be very good at supporting the end of a hopper car like this. The 188 thousandth inch wide plastic is plenty wide to cover up those 2 rivet holes. I put a little bit of glue down the center and just eyeball the 60 by 60 styrene centered into the side of it like that. For the underframe, I need to add a lot of 60 thousandths styrene to it. That is because the weight on Athearn cars is designed to go in between the underframe and the car body. And I need to make up for that because I'm not using the steel weight. The steel weight interferes with my magnetic uncoupling. So I just take these pieces of styrene and put them in there to space the floor frame out. These little pieces I'm putting at the end, they are there for reinforcing where the A-line stirrups will get drilled into the side. And I'll show you the importance of that later in this video, because I did run into the situation where I did need it. Now I'm going to glue the underframe pieces that I'm using from the original Athearn flat car onto the underframe itself. So you can see all the 60 thousandths styrene that I've added. There's some thick parts going up the center, there's thin parts on the side, and all that is necessary because the truck that holds the car up sits on that part of the underframe, and it has to be level or the car will not sit right. You will notice that in the picture that's on the screen right now, the coupler mounting pads are already installed in the flat car. They're going to disappear a little bit later. There was a design change made to the car which made me have to redo those pieces. So we will get back to them later. It's very important to make sure these are also glued securely in place. And there's not a lot of gluing surface. You just have the one main cross member where the truck sits and then a secondary cross member behind it. So make sure these are secure. And after I glued them in place with the model glue, I went through and touched them up with some all-purpose cement at the edges also, just to give them a little bit extra rigidity. This was the design change right here. And you can see the coupler mounting pads are now gone. I decided to add some end railings to this freight car. And I had this set of end railings for an old-time passenger car that I know I'm never going to build an old-time passenger car, so I had to find a use for these. And these are going to be fantastic at the end of this car. The detail on them is superb. It's actually got a lever you can see on the right side. Looks like it might be used to activate the dump mechanism. So they're beyond perfect for this car. That was a nice, pleasant surprise to find. All I have to do is drill out the ends for the 2 mounting pins. Looking at the end railing, you can see that there's the 2 mounting pins, but there's also 2 other rectangular pieces that must have served some purpose on the old-time car They're going to be removed. I'm also going to remove that protrusion from the end that goes over the coupler pocket. Those are going to be the modifications I make to this piece. Now I need to remove all of the end detail off of this flat car so that these have a nice flat surface to glue to. And that requires the number 11 X-Acto knife blade to come in there and just do some trimming up that gets cleaned up with a file. And when it's filed smooth, that should create a surface where you won't be able to tell that this is all separate pieces when the model's all finally painted and put together. I also need to remove a lot of the plastic around the coupler box area because this is going to require an extended shank coupler in order for this to work through those extended ends. So removing this plastic away from here, we can remove as much as we want to. This right here won't be visible once those brass castings are in place. Using my dial caliper, I measure the mounting pins, and the mounting pins, I believe, are about 40 thousandths of an inch in diameter. And I need to find out where I need to drill the holes for. So I measure from the outside of the two mounting pins, and I come up with it's about 520 thousandths of an inch, and I go ahead and take the 40 thousandths away, which gives me a center-to-center distance of about 480 thousandths of an inch, which is going to be my goal when I drill these holes. So I measure the width of the flat car itself, and when I find out what the width of the flat car itself is, I will reset the dial caliper to half that amount, and it looks like it's 1 inch and then 280 thousandths. So a half inch takes care of the 1 inch, then 100 thousandths takes care of the 200 thousandths, and then 40 thousandths takes care of the 80 thousandths. And that is my halfway mark right there. And I put the caliper on the side of the car, and I use it to scratch a center line. And then I set the dial caliper to 240 thousandths, which is half of my center to center distance of the pins, and going from the center of the car out, this will give me two perfect measurements on where I need to drill in order to make the mounting pins the proper width for that end rail. Now I need to figure out where to drill the holes vertically. So I measure the depth of the car, and from that depth measurement, I take away half of the pin diameter. When I do that, I'm going to drill the hole about 20 thousandths of an inch down from the inside of the flat. And that will let the drill bit just barely clear the inside of the flat. It's a 40 thousandths drill bit. And that will give me the railing mounted as high as possible. It's actually still a little bit low, but that's okay. You can't really see it when the car's all put together. And it saves me the trouble of drilling into the plastic at the bottom of the car body, which is something I wanted to avoid. That's difficult to do. You can snap your drill bit real easy. So I just take the easy way out. I'm using number 30 KD couplers, and the number 30 coupler is kind of difficult to assemble, but for this car, it turned out to be the right choice. The couplers I'm using have an underset shank, so it raises the coupler up a little bit higher. That gives me a little bit more clearance underneath that brass casting. The coupler mounting pads are made from 80 thousandths by 250 thousandths styrene. I cut two pieces of this styrene that are each about a ½ inch long, and I mark the end that is going to be towards the end railing. That's important because the coupler hole is not going to be exactly centered on these. So I measure back from that part that I marked, the right amount, and then measure 125 thousandths of an inch from the side, and that gives me a center down that, and that is where I'm going to drill my hole, where those two lines cross. I use my pin vise to drill a number 50 hole, and it goes through quite easily. Drilling plastic is so much easier than drilling other materials. And a good sharp drill bit makes those two nice little spiral pieces coming off the side just like that. And then I tap it out for a number 256 screw, and that will be what holds the coupler in place to the car body. Then I put a little bit of glue on the bottom of the flat car. And these two pieces take the place of the two pieces that I had to remove where the hole was in the wrong place before, making sure that that black mark goes towards the end railing on the car. When that glue dries, I'll have a nice secure spot to attach the coupler to the body of the car. I'm using KD number 517 trucks. I keep a lot of pre-painted KD trucks on hand. I paint my KD trucks in huge batches and then put them back in their packages. Now, there's a problem with these going on the Athearn underframe. This is a known issue. The wheels hit the bottom of the frame, so you have to use at least a 15,000th of an inch washer when you use KD trucks on an Athearn flat car frame. Just to sort of test everything works okay, I am putting the KD couplers in place, and then I'm going to use a very small 15,000th of an inch spacer underneath the trucks. Those are going to raise the trucks up just enough that the bolster is not going to hit the bottom of the Athearn frame. I'm attaching everything with brass screws for right now. Okay, I look at it, the KD truck springs move a little bit, so I have the clearance that I need. They just need to move enough to equalize the truck. They're not actually going to be compressed under a load. I'm going to set the frame on this piece of Bachmann Easy Track that I have that I use for checking coupler height. Put my KD coupler height gauge on there and check it, and it is perfect. I don't have any magical abilities here. I didn't just look at this and know that if I used a number 30 KD coupler with an underset shank and that I used a 15,000 spacer underneath these KD trucks, I would get a perfect coupler height. This is not my first rodeo with an Athearn flat car, so I had an idea what I was going to do long before I started this project. Now I'm going to add these 20,000ths of an inch spacer pieces under the body of the Athearn flat car. And if my calculation is correct, this is going to give me just about 30,000ths of an inch clearance in between the bottom of the hopper casting and the rails when the car is assembled. I'd still like to get the hopper a little bit lower, but I can't. If I take it any lower than this, it will be interfering with switch points and frogs and cross rails and anything else, which that's a situation you need to avoid. So we're just going to lower it 20,000ths of an inch, and that's where I'm going to have to be happy with it. Then I'm going to take some gel type super glue and just put a little bit of super glue on there, just enough to hold this resin casting in place, and set the casting in place and look at it, and it looks like it sticks out far enough. It looks like the spacing is right for the triangle body. That looks very good. Looking at the side of this car now, there is a space where the uprights from the triangle body did not line up with the stake pockets on the Athearn flat car. So I carved the stake pockets off of the Athearn flat car, and now using some 30,000ths by 125,000 styrene, I'm going to make some very heavy brackets that look like they would hold this body structure in place onto the flat car. So I'm cutting these about 3/4 of an inch long, and that looks like it's going to be the right height. It covers up all the scars from removing the original stake pockets. I'm going to take a number 17 X-Acto knife blade and remove all the rivet detail through here. That way I have a flat surface to glue those styrene pieces to. And then just using Tester's styrene glue, I'm going to glue them into place. I took some care here to make sure that they were all equally spaced from the ends, but I ended up with one that wasn't quite right, but I don't think anybody will ever notice. Not that anybody besides me is ever going to see it anyway. I'm also going to add a couple of tack boards that I had in my scrap box to the side of this car. I model 1954, and tack boards were still in use. These were something that was added to steel-bodied cars in the 1920s and 30s because they used to just tack these cards onto the side of the cars, but when the car stopped being wooden, they had to add these tack boards to the car so you had some place to tack these things to. And then I'm going to add new stake pockets. These are from Tichy, and they have two little mounting lugs on them that need to be very carefully removed, and that's where they mount onto the Tichy flat car kit. And then using a little bit of styrene glue, I'm going to glue 4 of these to each side of the car. And these have a different look than the Athearn ones. They stick a little bit further, but they're not quite as wide. This process wasn't anywhere near as easy as I thought it would be. These Tichy stake pockets are very, very fragile. If you squeeze the tweezers, you will crush them. So I tried using the self-closing tweezers to try to regulate the amount of pressure I put on them, but even the self-closing tweezers broke a couple of them. Then I'm adding these very small pieces of 30,000 square styrene to the side posts, and they just make the side posts come out a little bit further into where the side pocket area is. They also make it look a little bit beefier. Just a very simple detail to add. It gives a little more depth to the car, makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. Now time to touch up a little bit of the hopper body. The hopper body end is very plain looking. I decided just to make it look better, I would add some 100,000 styrene channel casting to it. This casting looks like a piece of, just basically cold rolled channel iron. And it makes the car look a little more heavy duty, a little more tough. And I'm just going to glue it right onto this flat surface on the side of the body. And that will make it look a little bit more interesting also. Certainly make it look like it's a little more reinforced. This doesn't take long, and it does add quite a bit to the car. And along the top of the hopper, I'm going to add a raised lip to each side. Again, just giving the car a little more depth, making it look more interesting, less like a toy, much less flat. And I cut these two pieces to length, and I glued them into place. The styrene glue worked very well on the Triang body. I was worried about that when I started because it seemed like it was a lot more rigid. It had no flex to it like styrene does. So it may be a different kind of styrene, or it could be just a different kind of plastic altogether, but the same welding cement worked just fine. I want to add a load to this car, and I have a lot of these AccuRail 2-bay hopper car loads. I mean, I have a lot of them. I have like 25 or 30 of them. I must have picked them up at a train show somewhere. So to get them flat, I am gluing some 80,000 by 100,000 styrene inside the car body, and I'm lining it up with that spot where the slope changes on the inside, and then just double checking it with the caliper to make sure that the depth is the same all the way around. The load certainly doesn't need to sit perfectly flat, but it should be, a little care should be taken just to make sure it gets in there as good as you can. I checked it. It seemed like it sat a little bit low, so I added some spacers to it, then a couple more spacers, and I think I have it where I want it. I'm going to cut about 3/4 of an inch off of each end using the Zona saw. And then I'm going to cut a little bit off of each side using the Zona saw, checking as I go, and the load fits in there just like I want. I don't want it to fit perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and add some more to it later, but for right now, this is just giving the load the right shape. Still a little bit lower than I wanted, so I'm going to add one more set of spacers to it. In the end, I think I should have stopped and not added these last two. The load did end up being just a little bit higher than I thought looked right, but at this point, I thought it was a little low, so I put them in. Checked it. I decided it looked fine right here. I think that looks perfect. I'm going to add nut bolt washer castings to those styrene pieces that I put on the side of the car, just to make it look very beefy and very heavy duty. Each one of these reinforcement plates is going to get 5 nut bolt washer castings added to it. So that is a total of 20 holes I have to drill into this car for these detail parts. And with that done, it's time to start adding these nut bolt washer castings. So the nut bolt washer castings that I'm going to use are made by Tichy, and I have no idea which ones they are. I just pulled some out of my scrap box that looked like they were the right size. I find it a lot easier to hold the washer with self-closing tweezers and then use a small pair of cutters to cut the sprue off. And then I'm left with the nut bolt washer casting in the tweezer. That works a lot better than cutting them off and then trying to pick them up with the tweezer. So that's just my technique. It may or may not work for you. I tried a lot of different ways to deal with these before I came up with this. And I put some plastic glue on the piece of styrene, and I put the peg from the nut bolt washer casting into the hole, and I push it into place. And that is one down and 19 to go. 19 isn't very many. I've built models with hundreds of nut bolt washer castings on them, especially custom orc vehicles for Warhammer 40K. I built one for my friend Rob that must have had 500 nut bolt washer castings in it of all different sizes. But these just add a lot to the model. They make everything look beefy and strong, and if you don't put them on, it just seems like something's missing. And that's what they look like when they're all done, and it's a nice big washer on there. They definitely look like they're going to get the job done. All that extra work put into these mounting plates at the end of this car was definitely worth it. I love the way this is looking. The load does not fit exactly perfectly inside the car. That was on purpose. I cut it so it would fit inside the slope sheets and fit onto the pieces that I glued on to the sides, which it does. And now I'm going to build up the ends and the sides using Knead-A-Tight blue and yellow epoxy putty. This is an excellent product to use for pretty much all your sculpting needs. This box is 5 years old. I probably can't use it for very fine stuff right now, but I can certainly use it for this. I cut 2 pieces of it off, and then I knead it together. And to knead it together, I fold, I twist, I fold, I twist, I press and fold and twist. It's kind of like what they do on Forged in Fire to make layered Damascus. And when you get it mixed all the way completely together, it's green. Blue and yellow makes green. It's easy to tell when it's mixed. Then I push the piece into where I want it, and then using sculpting tools, I push it into the shape that I want. And it's very important when you're working with Knead-A-Tight to know that you're pushing it around. You are not carving it. The sculpting process is moving the putty to where it needs to be. If you have too much putty, you have to remove the putty away from the model. But I've gotten to the point now, I've used this so many times, I can just eyeball how much putty to put down there, push it into place, and then it seems like it's always comes out pretty much close to right. And this stuff sticks very well, so I always have water nearby to keep the tools wet so the tools don't stick to it. Then I press it into place, and this will never let go. This stuff is tenacious the way it grabs onto something. So now I've got that basically sculpted into place. The next step is to give it a layer of wood glue. And this will just go in and fill in any places where I might have missed, because I'm going to be using a lot of liquids on the load, and I don't want any liquids going into that cavity. I want that cavity inside there where the lead weights are to stay perfectly dry. So I just brush on a nice liberal coating of wood glue, and I'm going to allow that to dry. And when it dries, it will plug up all the spots. It's also going to do a little bit for smoothing out the coal load and getting rid of some of that coal texture. My load is going to be much more fine, and I don't want all that coal texture up there anyway. So the wood glue will help with that. Now is the time to add the 4 grab irons to the side of the car body. I carved off the original cast-in grab irons that were on the Athearn car, and I'm going to drill number 78 holes for these grab irons. So I take my pin vise, I very carefully put in one of my number 78 drills, and I start by drilling a hole in a place where I know it's going to go, which in this case is going to be right in the center between the stake pocket and the side of the car. So I don't really have to measure the first hole. All the first holes get drilled in roughly the same place. Then I take my dividers and I match them up to the piece that's on the cutting mat and make sure that they're spaced correctly. And then I transfer that measurement up to the car body, and that gives me the location of the second hole. And I drill the second hole for each grab iron. And after all the holes are drilled, it's going to be time to put the grab irons into place. So the grab irons are made out of 10,000th of an inch phosphor bronze, and I grab a hold of them with a pair of needle nose pliers. I take the diagonal pliers and I cut the excess off of the legs. I always leave one leg longer than the other, and that's the leg I put in first, and I put the second leg in. A little bit of gel type super glue on there. It doesn't take very much. The hole that I drilled is about 12 or 13 thousandths of an inch in diameter, so you have 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch clearance to put the piece in. Then you lift it up, put it gently into place, make sure it goes into the holes. And this is not very difficult to do at all. And these pliers that I use, the tips are the exact perfect width for spacing the grab iron away from the car body. Now I'm going to attach the legs to the car for working on it. I've got the trucks taken off now, but these side details I'm putting on now are a little bit fragile, and I don't want anything to happen to the bottom of the car. So these pieces are just made out of 3/8 of an inch plastic angle, and I drilled one hole for a 256 screw, and they screw into the truck mounting screws. These keep any damage from happening to the side of the car. These are basically the same as the stuff that comes in the Tichy kits. And now I'm going to drill the holes for the A-line stirrup steps. And these A-line stirrup steps, for these, I use a number 65 drill bit. And I try to drill it down into the original plastic that was part of the Athearn car body. And again, I know where the first hole goes. I'm moving it just to the inside of the grab iron hole. This is why I added those plastic pieces to the car body. You can see this one hole that I drilled, I missed the plastic car body by just a hair. And when I did that, the drill bit tried to come out into the open part of the car. And with those extra pieces right there, it gives the drill bit something to drill into if you happen to be off by just 10, 15 thousandths of an inch. It saves a lot of frustration. And that's one of those things I've just learned by doing. For gluing the A-line stirrup steps in place, the process is very simple. You just take a little bit of the gel type super glue, put a little bit on each end, and then put the stirrups into the holes that you drilled. Now the number 65 hole gives you plenty of clearance. It's not a super tight fit, but since the holes go in from the bottom, nobody can see that the holes are oversized. And all together, the side body details, all those side pocket details, the nut bolt washer castings, those brass end rails, this is looking pretty sharp. So now I'm going to go and add some detail to this hopper bottom. There should be something on the hanging out the side of it. And I don't know anything about prototype hopper cars. I don't know what kind of latches things have, how these discharge doors work. I don't have any clue. But I know there should be something there that you can see when the car goes by. So what I'm going to do is just build a frame out of 4 pieces of 20 thousandths by 20 thousandths styrene and just add what I'm going to call the apparatus to the bottom of it. Now to get these in place, I'm just using white glue to hold them down temporarily to that resin casting. The white glue will not make a strong bond to either the resin or the styrene. Once I get this all put together and everything spaced properly, I will be able to break it off the bottom of the car very easily without damaging anything and without ruining any of my work. So I just use a pair of tweezers to push each piece into place up against the hopper bottom side, get it on that lip next to the discharge door, and now they're all in place. I need to let them sit overnight and dry. That way the white glue will at least be strong enough to hold everything in place while I put the other pieces of work on. So I have 2 pieces of styrene here that I just pulled out of the scrap box. I don't even know what size these are. I didn't measure them. It makes no difference. These pieces are going to go in the scrap box once they've done their job. And I'm going to glue these to the end of all 4 of these pieces and glue them together where they come out the side of the hopper. And this is only for the purpose of holding these pieces in alignment while I build whatever other parts of the apparatus are actually going to be permanently installed on it. In the middle, I'm going to add a piece of 100,000 styrene channel. And the only reason I'm using 100,000 styrene channel is because I had it left over from when I put those reinforcement ends on the end of the hopper body. And I will tell you, I have absolutely no idea if that's correct or not, but it looks really good when you look at it from the side. And once the glue is dried on all of those pieces, I take and very gently break that bond from the white glue, and I separate the apparatus from the bottom of the hopper discharge. I'm going to measure up on this piece how much is sacrificial, and I'm going to now very carefully cut those 20,000ths piece of styrene all in equal distance from that piece of channel iron that runs down the center. And those sacrificial pieces I've put on there to hold everything in place while the glue dried, now they're going to find their way right into the trash. Their tour of duty is over. I'm going to slice two pieces of this 10,000ths by 30,000ths inch styrene, and I'm going to glue them right to the end of those 20,000ths pieces. And when the glue dries, I will trim it all up so that each one of these forms two pieces. The center part of it will go away. But for right now, it's a whole lot easier just to glue one piece in place over four pieces of styrene than try to glue two pieces in place over two each. And now that everything is dry, I get out the number 17 X-Acto knife blade and I trim away everything that should not be there. And what I'm left with is this right here. It's an apparatus that has 4 rails that hold gates and guards and pieces in place, and it's got a center reinforcement strip. And I just get a little bit of liquid super glue, and I'm going to put just a tiny quarter drop on the side of each one of these hopper doors. And it doesn't take much to hold this in place. And then I'm going to center this up as carefully as I possibly can while I hold it with a pair of tweezers and push it in place right over those discharges on the bottom of the car. And now I've got a pretty nifty looking detail down there on the bottom that was actually very, very easy to build. There was almost nothing to it. The hardest part of it was waiting for the glue to dry. And look at that. That really is becoming something now. I'm very impressed. The printing on this is raised up very high, and it will show through when the car is painted. I'm using a number 600 grit sanding belt to go ahead and remove all the raised up parts of the lettering and cleaning it up with a number 17 X-Acto knife blade. And with all that removed, nothing will show through when the car is painted and ready for decals. And it is time for this to make a trip to the paint booth. And I painted it up in just basic black. Now my custom black mix is 4 parts black, 1 part red, and 1 part white. And it winds up with a nice, warm, very dark gray color. It doesn't hide all the details like straight black does, and you can see all the work you put into it. It is time to put decals on this car. Now I've got this little plastic piece here that holds the car level with these 2 pieces that I put on the side to protect the stirrups. This car has ribbed sides, so that means I have to slice the decals up to put them in between the ribs. Now, as a modeling a custom road name, I only have my road name available in 5 different sizes. And perfect size for this car would have been about maybe 10% smaller than a Rail Graphics size C. But I don't have anything between size C and size B, and size B was way too small. So I had to go with the size C, and the letters go up onto the ribs just a little bit more than I wanted them to. But when all was said and done, I think it looks okay. So working the pieces one at a time, I go ahead and just start applying them to the car side. I, at some point, will probably do a video where I lay out all of my techniques for applying decals to train cars, but this is not going to be that video. I'm just going to have this little portion right here where it shows the decals getting cut out, soaked in the water, put on the model, and how long it takes to do this. I think I ended up with about 14 or 15 decals on each side of the car to get this done, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not. I've done decals with cars where I've had 50 to 70 decals per side just to get it done. For the herald on this car, I went with only a 2-color herald. The standard Stratton and Gillette herald that I use on the side of my box cars has 4 colors. It has white and yellow and red and black. And 4 colors just seemed like it was too much for an aggregate car. So instead of having all that work, I figured they would paint this car with just a simplified 2-color herald. So it's just red and white. It has the Stratton and Gillette around the outside and white on the red circle. And inside it has the safety slogan, "Keep yourself alive." Because this would probably be kind of a dangerous car to operate, so it probably wouldn't hurt to remind the workmen who are doing their jobs that maybe they should be a little more careful when they're working with this particular piece of equipment. And once all the decals were on and everything was dull coated, I think this paint job turned out pretty good. And the decals that were just slightly larger than I hoped they'd be, well, I think they turned out looking okay. From the very end of the car, if you look at it, they do kind of crawl up around the ribs a bit, but I think it's fine. Now that the car's all been primed, it's time to get down to painting it. The first color I'm going to use is New Wood from Vallejo. And this is going to form the base color for the load that's going to be installed inside the car. And I'm just applying this with a number 0 brush and just one quick coat. This is all going to be hidden beneath the load anyway. So it's just a base coat. Don't need to be very neat. Don't need to be very careful with it. Just get it on there and move on to the next thing. This right here is saddle brown, and it's going to form the base rust color for the slope sheets. Now, not a lot of the slope sheets are visible. The load ended up just a little bit higher than I actually wanted it to be, but I still want to make the slope sheets rusty. So starting on the sides and then going to the ends, I'm going to paint all of the slope sheets with this base saddle brown. And the saddle brown is just basically there so it's not black. Then moving on to medium sea gray, I am going to start to paint the bottom of the hoppers. And this color is actually way too light, but I'm going to darken it up a bit later with a black wash. And I also want the color underneath to be a bit exaggeratedly light anyway, because these hopper bottoms and all that detail part that I added with the apparatus is going to disappear if I don't paint it a lighter color. So now I'm moving on to a bright orange color from Vallejo's Game Color line that I'm going to make the highlights for the rust with. I want this to be a brighter color. It's not going to be this bright once it's all said and done because I'm going to tone it down with a wash later. But this right here adds layer to it. And then moving on to a splinter brown color. This is from a German camouflage line. I'm going to paint the entire wooden deck of this freight car with this color. And the freight car is painted black and the wooden deck would have been painted black, but I want the deck to sort of look like it's wood. So what I'm going to do is paint it dark brown and then give it a black wash to bring it back to black. And hopefully, if that works right, it will look like a wooden deck. Now to add the wash to the rust, and for this I'm using AK Interactive Rust Streaks. The label says to clean it with something called white spirits. I don't know what that is. I don't have any. So instead of worrying about cleaning the brush, I'm going to use a disposable brush for this task and just throw the brush away when I'm done. I'm dabbing the rust streaks on down the sides, and I'm going to dab them to the slope sheet. And this is going to blend together that saddle brown color, the light brown color, and the bright orange. And I'm going to end up with hopefully a nice patchy rust color to the inside of the sheets. And it turned out great. I'm very happy the way that looked. And now to add the black wash to the deck. And for this, I'm using a slightly angled flat brush so I can reach underneath the hopper body. I need to be very careful. I don't want to get this on any of those decals. I could really do some damage here. So I was extremely careful putting this on. I just put enough on to bring the depth of that color back closer to black, and so it looked like worn wood. I also am going to add it to the upper bottom to darken that up a little bit and give it a little bit of depth. And the tack boards that I previously painted brown, I'm also going to give a black wash to as well, and hopefully they'll look like wood too. That's where I'm at with the car. Boy, that rust looks fantastic. I couldn't be happier with the way those rusty parts turned out. I'm going to highlight the handrails with white. This is kind of a safety feature to make it easier for the workmen to find the bar when they're climbing up. It makes the detail pop a little bit. This isn't something you want to do if your handrails are slightly oversized, but these are brass castings. They look great, so I did that. For the load, I'm wanting to model something that looks like a very, very fine aggregate or a fine bulk product. And I decided that grout, which worked so well in a previous building that I used for the foundation, had just the right texture for this. So to fasten the grout to the top of the car body, I just gave it a quick coat of regular Elmer's white glue. And from there, I used a square 1 tablespoon scoop, put a little bit of grout in it, and then I very carefully dabbed the grout into the car body. This grout has a colorant added to it that gives it the gray color. You can get grout in lots of different colors, but if you get this on the side of the car, the pigment from the grout can transfer to the car and it can do some damage to your paint job. And I was very careful to make sure that that was all kept to a minimum. To secure it in place, I used a little bit of diluted white glue, and this is thinned with Kodak Photo Flow 200, which is an excellent wetting agent to get rid of the surface tension. You can see it doesn't just ball up and run off. And just do it 1 drop at a time and let the fluid flow through the grout, and it will all moisten itself. That will activate the cement inside the grout. It will also pull up some of the white glue from the bottom, and you'll wind up with a load that's very securely fastened into the car. The look that I'm going for the load is Traeger pellets, the basic pellets that you use in a Traeger smoker grill. When they're in bulk, I think they look pretty neat. And if I can get it to look like that, I'll have a load that people won't look at and think that it's maybe stone or maybe gravel or maybe something heavy, but some sort of different bulk commodity that's being hauled in this car. To get this look, I'm adding a little bit of the Vallejo washes to it, 1 drop at a time in kind of a random pattern. I'm using 4 different colors of the Vallejo wash. I'm using the flesh, the brown, the black, and the umber color. I want that all to sort of blend, so I'm doing it while the grout is still wet with the water and the glue solution. And when I get all the different colors applied to it, I'm going to use a technique similar to a dot filter that the military modelers use and just dab it all together. Well, unfortunately, that didn't work, and I stopped the video because I got very frustrated at this point. The colors all just sort of blended together and turned into a purple, and it looked just awful. So I went about fixing it. And as I tried to fix it again and again and again, different things just didn't work. I tried dry brushing and damp brushing. I tried sponging. I tried everything I could think of to make this load look like a load. And I probably wound up with between 20 and 30 different layers of pigment on top of this load. The final result, color-wise, I am very happy with. The load turned out okay. Unfortunately, I completely lost all that rust work I did to the slope sheets. I ended up just painting the slope sheets a dark gray with some brown highlights when all was done. I also lost so much of the texture underneath all those different layers of paint. But that got the look I was looking for. It looks like a strange commodity. I think this car looks like it's in specialized service very well. Overall, this project was very rewarding, and except for some problems with the load at the end, everything went very smoothly. And I'm glad I have this unique car in the fleet right now. It's going to be one of a kind. I'm not going to do another one, and it will occasionally show up and be spotted somewhere on the layout, or maybe just be taken from the car float and moved over to a yard and sent off on a through train. But it's going to add some visual interest, and it's going to add some operations. And This was a very, very good project from the scrap box, turning an old European toy into a scale American model. And I do thank you for watching.